We're going to start by talking about AMLO, Andres Lopez Obrador, who has who was inaugurated over the weekend as the president of Mexico. We have a brief clip that we're going to play from Al Jazeera English. It will be about 20 seconds. I gave you a time code on this. All right, yeah.
He got straight to the point. 30 years of free trade policies and growing privatization were out.
The
neoliberal policies have been a disaster, a calamity for the country.
And a cleanup would begin.
If you ask me to explain one phrase the plan of the government, I'll say, wipe out corruption and impunity.
He says the money saved from cleaning up graft will furnish new social programs.
Okay, and I just want to quote here from this is a book that AMLO released in Mexico. It's called A New Hope for Mexico, and it was translated for the UK and Commonwealth Press and by Orr Books in the United States. And this was published in the Jacobin with, of course, Crew, Bhaskar Sunkar's magazine. Everybody should be reading and subscribing to the Jacobin. In terms of our collective well-being, this is AMLO. In terms of our collective well-being, the politics of pillage have been an unmitigated disaster. In economic and social affairs, we've been regressing instead of moving forward. This is hardly surprising. The model itself, and this is speaking of neoliberalism, the model itself is designed to favor a small minority of corrupt politicians and white-collar criminals. The model does not seek to meet the needs of the people or to avoid violence and conflict. It seeks to neither govern openly nor honestly. It seeks to monopolize the bureaucratic apparatus and transfer public goods to private hands, making claims that this will somehow bring about prosperity. The result, monstrous economic and social inequality. So, and he goes on. As in any case, there is never going to be successful left governance without a highly mobilized base, and there's also going to need to be a global synchronization of governments and movements. So the task ahead is very hard. The literal politics of him taking on the types of corruption networks in Mexico and how they implicate all of the ruling class there, as well as U.S. foreign policy and drug cartels, are quite literally potentially extremely dangerous. But he is a light right now in this situation and a counterbalance to an emerging far-right neo-fascist core, which will now be led by Bolsonaro and backed, of course, by the Trump regime in Latin America. So we'll continue to watch and follow AMLO closely. Now we're going to throw this up on screen for a second. I tweeted this out the other day. I had an opportunity to speak with, just for a couple of minutes, just in a room, with Fernando Haddad. Again, this is actually through our friend Bhaskar over at Jacobin, who helped organize a tour of New York of Fernando Haddad, who is, of course, the presidential candidate who took Lula's place after the Brazilian courts in a obscene act of anti-democratic animus, after already making him a political prisoner, barred him from running, even though he was outpolling everybody else by double digits and almost certainly would have defeated Bolsonaro if oligarchs and the military had not intervened in another way, in addition to the first step of making him a political prisoner and barring Lula from running. Fernando Haddad actually spoke on how Brazil fit into a broader collapse of neoliberalism as well. He was both simultaneously very willing to acknowledge the failings of the Workers' Party to take on some of those more structural efforts that they needed to make when they were in power, but also was very realistic and thorough about the risks and the limits they faced. And he asked, humbly and very sincerely, we got to keep calling our representatives on this, literally. Everybody inside the Democratic Party needs to be speaking on the rights situation in Brazil. Another little across the board, because there's going to be a full-scale attack on every category of people there. And part of the reason that Lula as a political prisoner is so important is because it's the same reason that the hit squad that assassinated Marielle Franco and killed her and her driver, there's still been no arrests in that case. And that's almost certainly part of the same right-wing nexus of of the police state, of narco gangs, and of the right that are taking over Brazil. One young woman, Afro-Brazilian woman, spoke to Haddad, and she said, you know, Marielle was a lesbian, a black woman from the favelas. They murdered her. Lula was a metal worker, came from poverty, and lifted us. They put him in jail. And these are both real and symbolic examples of the eliminationist strategy of the Brazilian regime under Bolsonaro, and of course with the active support of all of Western finance and capital, the endorsement of the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times saying that AMLO is a greater threat to democracy than Bolsonaro, the just sort of deranged moral grotesqueness of these people in full light. Lula matters, though, because in addition to him, Judge Sergio Moro, who is the judge who ran Lava Jato and put Lula in prison, is now the justice minister of Bolsonaro. He has already started talking about targeting other PT leaders, including Fernando Haddad, and just yesterday announced to the country, guess where his next major site of corruption that he sees in Brazil that he's going to plan on attacking with his justice ministry. Does anybody have any guesses?
Labor unions?
Labor unions. That is the next major site of quote-unquote corruption that a far-right fascistic con man who is feted across the United States and Europe by either naive idiot liberals who don't understand politics or outright brutal fascists who want a regime that will totally strip Brazil of all of its resources, as well as all other countries in the developing and emerging world. So please, solidarity for that. And also in line with a very good effort of the Sanders Institute to launch a progressive international. Yet another reason why, if you have any kind of actual progressive politics, and he runs, there's just no debate about who you support in the 2020 primary. Obviously, it's got to be Bernie Sanders. You just enjoyed that Michael Brooks Show video, and you can get a lot more by subscribing to us here at the Michael Brooks Show YouTube channel. It's literally right there.